All right, welcome back, guys. So, where we left off, we were talking about causes for the American Revolution, like the French and Indian War, and that the French, those jerks, came in and attacked us, and the British, even bigger jerks, wanted us to help pay for saving us in a war. So they start putting limitations on the the colonists that they were not used to. So, what does America do? We move on and we declare our independence. Written by Thomas Jefferson, with a lot of assistance from Ben Franklin and John Adams, which is rarely talked about. Thomas Jefferson's given most of the credit, but both of them play a major role in this as well. Issued on July 4th, 1776, almost 1 year after those first battles of Concord and Lexington that we talked about in our last episode, was the document that declared the 13 colonies were not associated with the British Empire anymore. They were now free and independent to do as they see fit, which was a major declaration. Nobody had really tried doing anything like this before, declaring your independence from the European power. So this is a huge document with a lot of different parts to it. We will analyze it in class, but essentially it breaks down into 4 different sections here, okay? Those are grievances against the king. Okay, first of all, there are 27 things that they complain about the king. He sets up false courts that arrest people. He is taking away their ability to make new laws for themselves. He's doing all sorts of things, limiting that independence that they had kind of grown used to over the years because of the ocean between them and Britain. Justification for the revolution. So the fact that the government is becoming corrupt means that we have the right. It's the responsibility of the people to overthrow a government that has become destructive, is what Thomas Jefferson says. What's the purpose of a government? Okay, and explaining the rights of all citizens. These two can go hand in hand a little bit. The purpose of a government is a social contract that all men are created equal, that among these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the purpose of a government. The government's supposed to protect those things, and that's the right of all people. The government should be working to protect those things for the people. So the Declaration of Independence, this amazing document that's meant to be read out loud, is finished, sent to the British, read in the colonies, but also sent to the rest of Europe. And why might they have sent it to the rest of Europe, do you think? They sent it to France and to Prussia and to other European powers because they needed help to defeat the British. And the British didn't have very many friends back in Europe either. So those are the main audiences for the Declaration. Okay? We declared our independence. We're our own 13 United States of America. Woohoo! What now? Now what do we do? Well, what does every country have to organize itself, some sort of mechanism to structure itself? You got to have a government. The first government in the United States is the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation is the government that operates under the Revolutionary War, and it has a lot of flaws. So it's a loose alliance of sovereign states. So it's essentially like 13 independent countries that came together to fight a war. Now, you can imagine there's a lot of problems that go on with this. It's a very weak government, so they can't regulate trade between the states. So what do states start doing? They place tariffs on products made in other states, leading to trade wars. Waterways that go between one state and another become disputed and become, rival territory, where you could even potentially see a war breaking out between different states. They didn't have the power to tax. They could only request funds from the states. So without the ability to tax, a lot of those Revolutionary War soldiers that were promised financial support during the war were never paid, or were paid a fraction of what they were promised because the federal government didn't have money to pay them. And also, they couldn't regulate currency, which means if you went from one state to another, you had to change your currency. So a lot of problems here, a lot of issues. The colonists realize there's all these issues with it. So they come together in 1787 in Philadelphia, and they have the Philadelphia Convention, or more popularly known, the Constitutional Convention. So guess what they wrote there? The Constitution. So from the Articles, the delegates quickly realized at the Philadelphia Convention, we couldn't just amend the Articles of Confederation. We had to come up with something new. Okay? What were any of the major achievements under the Articles of Confederation? Well, first and foremost, we won the war. They were able to organize the 13 states close enough to defeat the British and unite them during that. Well, when the war got over, that's when things really start to fall apart. But one positive thing that they did do was the Northwest Ordinance. So they were able to organize this territory north and west of the Ohio River that now make up Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota. And they broke it down into, tiny squares, into 40-acre sections that you could purchase and move out and farm. So it's a major, land capability for someone with such little technology during this time. So they were able to plot that out. And two other things I think are important is that they banned slavery in this territory, and that they said that education would be mandatory in these territories. So these new states had to provide education. So it shows that our early founders had ideas that slavery was a negative, that slavery was bad. And it also shows that they believe the only way our country could be successful in the future is if we had an educated populace, if we had people that could read and write and participate in our democracy. So, the Constitution. This is kind of what we'll be getting into here in a little bit. This is the second form of government that we live under. Okay, the Philadelphia Convention led to a lot of disagreements and a lot of disputes. Okay, first of all is the idea about representation. The New Jersey Plan and the Virginia Plan. The Virginia Plan was proposed first, where everybody would get a certain number of delegates based on the size of the state. So Virginia, the Virginia Plan, had the most people. So they would have by far had the most representation in Congress. They could have dictated everything that happened in the country as the largest state. If we fast forward today, if we used that system, California would dominate politics in the United States. All decisions for the entire country would be made by the largest state, California, even though they don't necessarily represent the values of Hoosiers or people in North Dakota or Florida. The other view was the New Jersey Plan, and this was equal representation for everybody in Congress. That meant every state would get the same number of votes. Well, that's not really fair either. That would mean that Rhode Island would have the same amount of power in politics as Virginia, even though Rhode Island has like 7 people that live there. Today, that would be like Wyoming have the same political power as California. Now, I don't think California should rule over the whole country, but there are 45 million people that live there, and there's 45 people that live in Wyoming. They probably shouldn't have the same political power nationally. So the compromise was a House of Representatives based on population. If you have more people in your state, you get more people in the House. And the Senate, our modern-day Congress, where every state gets 2 senators, no matter how big or how small. Another controversy was over slavery. The slavery debate is in 2 different parts. Okay, first of all, population. Do they count towards the population? Because if you have a bigger population, you get more representatives. So that turns into the 3/5 compromise, that every slave would be worth 3/5 of a person when counting the population of a state. This benefits southern slave states so they get more representatives in the House of Representatives, but it also hurts them because the way taxes were originally written in the Constitution, you paid based off of how many people were living in your state. So yes, they got to send more representatives, but they also got to pay more in taxes as well. The strength of the central government was also a major debate. We broke away from Britain to have a weak central government, to make sure we didn't have a government that takes away the rights of the people. And here we are creating a government with a lot of power to the people. And that begins a debate. The Federalists, who are for the ratification of the Constitution, and the Anti-Federalists, that are opposed to the ratification of the Constitution. So this debate becomes very, very heated, very, very intense. One of the biggest political debates of our country, probably the biggest one. Okay, so you have these 2 factions arguing, and we'll get into more detail here in a little bit.